Welcome in once again to 4 for 4 Football's the most accurate podcast series. This is the Week 3 Waiver Wire Show. I am Matt Okada, your Waiver Wire host here at 4 for 4. The article is up, published, and being freshly updated by the minute with brand new Carson Steele news. Oh, goodness gracious. Yes, we will get to that very, very soon. And a bunch of other stuff. It is there's one game left in week 2 because this is Monday morning that we record this. So the Falcons-Eagles is yet to play, but every other game is in the books, and holy mackerel, was it a doozy of a week. There were a billion, it felt like, wild, unexpected upsets. The Raiders beat the Ravens. The Saints annihilated the Cowboys. The Bucks beat the Lions. The Vikings beat the Niners. It was a mess. And the larger mess to come out of the week was all of the injuries. If you've been on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, or whatever social media platform, you've probably seen a ton of people crying and giving up on fantasy football after the mess of big name injuries that we have suffered, or that they have suffered, and we are now suffering through this week. Fortunately, that's what the waiver wire is for. So that is why I am here, and we will try to find answers and tackle these problems over the next 45 minutes to an hour. Reminder, there is a Q&A after we go through the top 5 ads. So if you want to add questions, throw them down in your comments wherever you're watching this, and we will tackle those at the end. But let's start at the very top here. The number one ad of the week, probably somewhat unsurprisingly, if you are freshly updated on news, is going to be Chiefs running back Carson Steele. Now, let's lay some groundwork for this. Number one, in case you haven't heard, Isaiah Pacheco suffered what seems to be a potentially serious ankle injury at the very end of week 2 against the Bengals. This sucks. I was a huge Pacheco fan, and he was putting together a monster start to the season. Looked like everything we wanted him to be. It was great. And then what is being reported, fractured his fibula. The severity of this fracture is likely to determine how long he is out, but the reports I am seeing across much of certainly social media, we have yet to get some, concrete news from the team, is that he is likely to go to IR. That's from Adam Schefter, and is likely to miss much more than the minimum 4 weeks, potentially as many as 12 weeks, I'm seeing in a number of places. Obviously, that means he's basically out for the whole fantasy season. That would be horrible. Let's hope that's not the case. Fingers crossed, prayers up for Pacheco. But if it is, it means somebody is going to have to step up in this running back room. So that's what makes Carson Steele number one on the waiver priority. For those of you who don't know, which should be almost everybody because he's an undrafted rookie free agent, he's an undrafted rookie free agent for Kansas City that was serving almost more as a fullback or kind of a sort of fullback. He had gotten the majority of rushing attempt work that Pacheco didn't take when there was any need for a change of pace. Samaje Perine, who the Chiefs signed right before the season, had been serving as sort of a pass-catching alternative when Pacheco needed third down work to be spelled. Samaje Perine, to me, does not have a chance to take over the full-blown Pacheco role or the early down role or the short yardage role or the goal line work. All of that for now should go to Carson Steele. Now, Samaje Perine, I do believe, will take the pass-catching work, the majority of the third down work, which means Steele, in my opinion, does not slide fully into the Pacheco role because Pacheco was doing a lot of both of that. That means that, to me, Steele is not a blow your entire fab budget because you're getting the replacement to Isaiah Pacheco and therefore an RB1. If you look in my article or if you're watching this stream on YouTube or Twitter, you will see that I'm recommending 18 to 22% of fab for Carson Steele. He is still the number one priority, but this is not a great week for waivers somehow, despite all the injuries. So I do not feel confident blowing half your fab. I don't really even feel confident blowing a quarter of your fab. This 18 to 22% is for people who are really in need of a running back fill in. If you don't need a running back and this would just be to put Carson Steele on your bench, I wouldn't even bid this much. I was talking with Addison Hayes at 4 for 4 before launching this stream. He gave the opinion of he's going to let someone else blow their fab on Carson Steele and just stay out of it. And I'm not entirely opposed to that concept. I think that there is a very good chance that A, Carson Steele and Samaje Perine eat into each other's usage, and therefore neither of them is worth huge fab budget. B, because Pacheco was this true RB1 and they now don't have him, they don't try to fit Carson Steele into Pacheco's role and continue running the offenses they had, but instead they slide back to the olden days of Patrick Mahomes throwing all over the yard, and the Chiefs become what they had been prior to last year. That's good for Patrick Mahomes and it's good for the pass catchers, but it's not good for Carson Steele and or Samaje Perine. Maybe Perine if he's just getting the pass catching work and they do a ton of that. I just think it's very likely that Kansas City adjusts their offense based around the personnel that they have available to them. And then lastly, I don't think it's unlikely at all that they go out and add somebody to compete for touches here. It would not surprise me one bit. In fact, I'd expect it. It's just a question of who they add and how much they can compete with or push Carson Steele for carries and early down work. So it's a lot. It is complicated. It is early on, even the Pacheco news. We still don't have really concrete stuff from the team yet. But for now, what I am saying is Carson Steele is the number one ad if you're in a ordered waiver pickup, and he is worth roughly a fifth of your fab budget if you are in need at running back and want to blow that much. Perine, I am saying, is worth maybe 5 to 6% of your fab budget, and I believe he came in at 7th in my waiver priority. Check the article. It's a tough situation. Honestly, I just hope Pacheco comes back soon. But until then, this is the outlook on Carson Steele and Samaje Perine. Going to number 2 in waiver priority, it is Demarcus Robinson. He was in the waiver article last week, but not this highly prioritized. And I actually liked Tyler Johnson a little bit more just based off the Puka Nacua injury. However, we are not only dealing with the Puka Nacua injury now, we are also dealing with a Cooper Kupp injury. He exited the game with an ankle injury. He tried for like a minute or two to come back, but just didn't have a chance. And then he was eventually seen in a walking boot. So that's not great. A lot of medical experts on Twitter suggesting that that means it is a potential mid to high ankle sprain, which means he will likely miss a couple, maybe a few weeks. In his absence, Demarcus Robinson feels like the top target on this team pretty confidently. Neither him nor Tyler Johnson did all that much in week 2. It was a wacky game that the Cardinals got way ahead in very early, and it was never really close. Matthew Stafford was getting pummeled throughout the game, but behind what is an unfortunately porous offensive line after they suffered a bunch of injuries as well. So all told, this is another tough situation. I don't think Demarcus Robinson is going to be a wide receiver 1. I don't think he picks up what Puka Nacua or Cooper Kupp should have been. However, if he's going to be the target leader on this team and he's going to get 8, 9, maybe even 10 targets, given how little else there is and how much the Rams are going to have to throw, given how things have gone these first couple weeks, he is a priority ad. So he's number 2 in the ordered priority order. Listen, it's early on a Monday morning. And I have him at 11 to 13% of fab bid in the article. Temper expectations. I think he can be a low-end wide receiver 2, maybe a high-end wide receiver 3. I will also say Tyler Johnson is still worth the ad. I have him at 6 to 7% of your fab bid, and he does make the top 10 in priority order. But he's more likely a matchup-dependent flex play unless we see in the next week or two that he does supplant Robinson for that number 1 target role. For now, I believe it's going to be DeMarcus leading the wide receiver group. and that makes him a strong add and probably a start in most leagues for the foreseeable future. Again, hoping Cooper Kupp gets back soon and hoping Puka Nacua gets back soon once he's eligible off of IR. But from what we've heard there, that seems unlikely. He may be missing much more than the 4-week timeline. Number 3 in waiver priority and in perfect time to answer Middle Age Riot's question in the chat on Twitter. Hello, Middle Age Riot. Derek Carr is the number 3 waiver priority in my article this week. What world are we living in? I will tell you what world we are living in. It is the Saints world. Goodness gracious. Listen, we're just going to say it like it is. Through 2 weeks, Derek Carr has been the best quarterback in the NFL. He has 43 fantasy points. That is second in the league to only Baker Mayfield. Imagine that. He has a 76.9% completion rate. That is second in the league. He has 11.4 yards per attempt. That is first in the league. 5 touchdown passes is tied for first. And he has a 142.4 passer rating, which is absurd and is first in the league by a lot. And I'm sure the general reaction from anybody who doesn't know what has happened in New Orleans in the offseason is this has to be a fluke. It has to be a random result of a 2-week stint that started off really great. Fair enough, because I felt that after week 1 when they had played the Panthers. But after week 2, in which Derek Carr and the Saints obliterated the Dallas Cowboys, I am completely sold on Clint Kubiak and this new offense. So New Orleans went out this offseason after having the same offensive system for like 2 decades. It was incredibly stale. It had very little motion. It was uncreative. And on a team like this, with the personnel that they have, all of which is incredibly versatile, that was just a recipe for disaster, which is why this offense was not good. They went out and got Clint Kubiak, who was the 49ers passing game coordinator last season. I don't know if they looked at their personnel in New Orleans and said, let's be San Francisco 2.0, or if this is just an incredibly lucky, mess of fate. I'm going to lean towards the former and give New Orleans props here because that's exactly what has happened. They are New Orleans, or they are San Francisco 2.0 in New Orleans. You have Alvin Kamara, who is pretty much Christian McCaffrey light, I will say, although, in his prime, Alvin Kamara was Christian McCaffrey, and he's looking like his prime once again. He scored 4 touchdowns in week 2. You have Chris Olave kind of being the Brandon Ayuk true wide receiver 1. You have Taysom Hill filling the Deebo Samuel / George Kittle / Kyle Juszczyk, do everything, take stuff out of the backfield, line up everywhere role. And you have Rashid Shaheed kind of being Juwan Jennings, the downfield threat, except better and also more involved in other aspects of the game. He got 3 rush attempts in week 2 and is being motioned all over the place. And in case it's not obvious, you put all that together, and that makes Derek Carr Brock Purdy, who was last year's QB6 in fantasy. I'm sold. I'm bought in. It took 2 weeks. I was not a believer after week 1. I was not a believer coming into the season, but I'm going to shift with the shifting tides, and I am going to buy into this Saints offense. That means I'm buying into Derek Carr. I believe that he will be a QB1 rest of season. You should add him, and in 2 QB leagues, you should go trade for him. So that's priority number 3. Priority number 4 is Khalil Shakir. In last week's waiver column, Shakir was actually 62% rostered, and I technically wasn't allowed to have him in the article because it's a 60% rostership cutoff, but I snuck him in anyways because I love Khalil Shakir. Apparently, no one wanted to listen to me. He was dropped in 3% of Yahoo leagues, which means he's now officially legally eligible for the column, which means he is in there, and I believe he should be added. I have him at 8 to 9% fab bid. He is good. That's pretty much the most I can say. I mean, there's other stuff that I can say, which I will, but I will just start it off with he is good. He is passing the eye test. I think he's the best receiver on the team, both as a route runner and after the catch. He's a legitimately talented player. On Thursday Night Football, when the Bills annihilated the Dolphins, he led the team in targets and catches with 5 each. He led the team in receiving yards with 54. His 16 routes were second behind only Keon Coleman, who had 17. And if that number sounds incredibly low, it is. And that's because they didn't need to throw it all. They were just running the entire game because they were blowing the Dolphins out. This team is going to run a lot and they're going to blow out some other teams. But 16 routes or 17 routes being the tops in the receiver group is not going to be the case often. Josh Allen just threw 13 completions. That's not going to be the case often. Shakir had a 28% target share in this game. You have any sort of normal pass volume from Josh Allen, and that's going to become unbelievably valuable for fantasy. As I said, I think he's the best receiver in this core. If anyone's going to break out into that Stephon Diggs role, where they're a legitimate wide receiver 1 for this team and at least wide receiver 1, maybe wide receiver 2 for fantasy, I believe it will be Khalil Shakir. So I think you should add him, and I believe he's startable, especially in PPR. If you can hold him on your bench because you've got solid starters, that's even better, and just wait for the breakout to fully take effect, which I believe it will. Khalil Shakir, priority number 4. And then priority number 5, it kind of starts falling off a cliff here pretty quick, is Ty Chandler for the Vikings. He is rostered in 29% of leagues, so he's pretty available. Not entirely sure why. I have him at 6 to 7% fab bid and the number 5 priority overall. I'm not sure why he's only 29% rostered. He is the change of pace back who can have flex value, as we saw on Sunday when he took 9 carries for 82 yards. But also he's the clear backup and handcuff to Aaron Jones, who obviously has had some injury history. He should be rostered in 80-90% of leagues. Ty Chandler should. In week 2, he played just 35% of snaps to Aaron Jones' 61%. So he is still obviously a distant second, but he had 1 more carry and 50 more rushing yards than Aaron Jones on those much fewer snaps. So that tells you how they're willing to get Chandler involved, even without Aaron Jones missing time. If Aaron Jones does suffer any sort of injury, miss any time, Ty Chandler would be a potential RB1, certainly a decent RB2. And I think he's a playable asset in your flex spot or in bye weeks. So he's worth having on your roster regardless. Add Ty Chandler. Don't let him be 29% rostered next week, please. I don't want to write about him again. That is the week 3 list. Carson Steele up top. We'll see what happens in Kansas City, but for now, he is the clear priority add. Demarcus Robinson and Khalil Shakir at wide receiver, if you need help there. Derek Carr, if you need a starting quarterback, if your guy is underperforming or you had Jordan Love or something like that, I'd absolutely go and grab Derek Carr. I wouldn't even hate adding him as a backup or a gonna stream him with my QB1 sort of option. And then Ty Chandler at number 5, only running back after Carson Steele of really any addable value. But if you want to see more names, both at running back and every other position, check out the Waiver Wire Watch article on 4for4.com. You can go to 4for4.com/plans to sign up if you're not already signed up. At 4for4, use promo code YouTube and you get 25% off. So that's huge. Do that. Go see the whole list. There are other names that I think could have some significant value. Week 3 waivers is a big one because some of these guys end up being the Pukas or Kyron Williamses for rest of season. I don't feel great about this week's names, but you're going to want to check them out anyways. Also, the drop list this week is all quarterbacks. Every other position is too banged up and too shallow, it feels like right now. So I have literally no drops on the drop list in the article at any other position. But at quarterback, there are a few names who people may have tried drafting as a QB1 or fringe QB1, I think can be dropped. So go check those out. That is the top 5 plus a little bit. Oh, one other quick thing. Honorable mention that technically isn't in the top 5 because he's 62% rostered, but I snuck him into the article again. I'm going to be doing this all season. Listen, I like to break the rules. Rashid Shaheed is 62% rostered. And if you heard what I said about Derek Carr, You can apply it here to Rashid Shaheed. He looks unbelievable through 2 weeks in New Orleans. He caught all 4 of his targets in week 2 for 96 yards and a 70-yard touchdown. Added 13 yards on 3 carries. He's heavily involved. He's being motioned all over the place. He's being used in that 49ers way creatively. And downfield, Derek Carr and him have an unbelievable connection. Is he going to score a 70-yard touchdown every week? Maybe not, but he's basically done it once each of the first 2 weeks, and he might do it more often than anybody else in football. So I really like adding him as well. All right. That is the top ads. Let's get into the Q&A. Throw your questions into chat wherever you're at. Keep them flowing, and we will go through what we can. Demetrios Asprogianis. I'm going to go with that. Give me a rating on that attempted pronunciation, 1 to 10. Or don't if it's bad. Hello, I have Isaiah Pacheco. If he missed his time, should I pick up Carson Steele or Tyler Algier? Well, I think I probably covered this, Demetrios, but I will give you some clarity. Isaiah Pacheco is going to miss time, probably a lot of it. If you don't have an IR slot, you may have to get prepared to drop him depending on the news as it becomes more concrete. Keep a close eye on that. But regardless, for now, you should add Carson Steele. Tyler Algier is not a bad guy to have on your bench somewhere, but I don't think he's startable right now. And Carson Steele, for at least next week until we see how it pans out in Kansas City, is going to be startable. Also, keep an eye on whether they add somebody quickly, because if they do, the name will matter. Hit me up on Twitter if you want my thoughts. And Francis, quickly after that, said in chat, Steele over Pirine. Yes, I think I gave my explanations for that. If you're in PPR, there's a decent chance that Pirine has nearly as much value as Steele, but I'd rather have the guy who's going to get the bulk of opportunities and the goal line work for now until further notice. Also, Patrick Mahomes has never really been a guy to pepper the running back position with targets. And if they go that direction where they slide back to him throwing the ball downfield a ton, because that's the way the offense has to go with no Pacheco, that I don't think Pirine's going to be a 6, 7, 8 target guy. And that's probably what he would need to be worth more than Steele, even in PPR. Miggy asks, what is the fab budget on Alec Pierce? Not high, Miggy. In fact, you will not find Alec Pierce in my waiver wire watch. I do not buy into this offense, Anthony Richardson, or the wide receivers here, unless their name is Michael Pittman. I know Alec Pierce has had a couple big plays through 2 weeks. I just don't trust it. Anthony Richardson, despite his arm being massive and the 1 or 2 highlight plays a week, might be one of the worst passers in the league right now. Yes, you heard me. I go into it in the waiver wire article. He has been atrocious, below 50% completion percentage through 2 weeks. It's not good. So, Alec Pierce, listen, if you want to throw in 1, 2, maybe 3% because you're in need of wide receiver, go for it. But I do not feel confident that he's going to be a reliable asset. I'd much rather go get Rashid Shaheed. Obviously, he's more roster than Alec Pierce, or at least I would assume that he is. Let's check on Alec Pierce really quick before we go too crazy here. 28% rostered, yeah, so he's pretty available. If you want to go grab him, I mean, I don't hate it. I'm just not prioritizing Pierce, and I wouldn't put in more than 1 or 2% of my fab bid to get him. I think there are better options, and he won't be reliable. Middle-aged Riot asked early on, Derek Carr versus Sam Darnold rest of season. I clearly believe it's Derek Carr. However, I will note that Sam Darnold is in the article, and he is the number 2 quarterback in the quarterback list. That being said, and I say this very early on in my blurb on Sam Darnold, I'm not convinced that he is fixed just yet. Unlike Derek Carr, who I am convinced on, I do not feel fully confident that Sam Darnold is suddenly a great quarterback or that this offense will be clicking all year with him under center. And not only that, but Justin Jefferson got banged up in week 2. I believe it's a thigh contusion or it's something, a leg contusion of some kind. Might not be his thigh. But it is likely to not force him to miss much time. So that should be okay. But if he's banged up at all, that will hurt Darnold, obviously. I still think he should be added, fringe add in QB1 leagues, but I'm not throwing him into my starting lineup immediately, and I am doing that with Derek Carr, so he's the clear add for me. William E. says, I hope this helps the tight end Parkinson. I believe that comment was when I was talking about Demarcus Robinson and the injuries to Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. It seems likely, William, that is the case. Parkinson is in the waiver wire column. He didn't do much in week 2 either, but like I said, it was kind of just a blown game. I'm kind of chalking it up as a fluke. And with the target opportunity that will be available in LA, sans Nacua and Cooper Kupp, I think that will help Colby Parkinson. I do believe he should be rostered. And the way tight end is going right now, he might be startable depending on who else you have. It's not pretty at the tight end position. Demetrios asks, trade DK Metcalf and Gus Edwards for James Cook. Not a waiver wire question, but an interesting question. This is tough. I think it probably depends on your positional setup, because Gus Edwards is sort of just a toss in here. It's really about DK Metcalf for James Cook. And I believe DK Metcalf is a great, very, very strong wide receiver asset. I said after week 1, do not panic. He will be great. And he came out and had 10 catches for 129 yards and a touchdown on 14 targets against the Patriots. Week 1, he was up against Broncos corner. The name is escaping me right now. Elite Broncos corner. It'll come to me at some point. Shame on me for not knowing. But I said very quickly in several places on social media that his Metcalf's bad week 1 was a result of the lockdown from Patrick Surtain, is who it was. That will not be the case most weeks. He is a great, great wide receiver, fringe wide receiver 1 asset. So him and James Cook, I would say, are pretty close to even. Sans position. But if you have a greater need at running back, which most people probably do, the position is a little shallower. Or if you have a deeper wide receiver core in general, this is a trade I would probably make because James Cook is a extremely lucrative running back 1, it looks like, rest of season. So I would go out and get him if you can, if you would be in need at running back. Oscar Ramiro, maybe just take it the simple way. Noted in chat, Joe Mixon getting an ankle MRI. Pick up Cam Akers, waiver number 1. Not waiver number 1, Oscar, because of the names noted, but Cam Akers is worth a look. This is very recent news, so I don't believe that you will actually see Cam Akers in the waiver article yet. However, I will be adding him probably right after this show because, as you mentioned, Joe Mixon hurt his ankle. What I've seen on social media is that it is potentially a high ankle sprain. Obviously, that would not be good. It would likely mean a couple weeks missed, maybe a few. That would make Cam Akers addable because this offense is great and he is likely the next man up. But Cam Akers is not Joe Mixon. I don't think he will step in and have Joe Mixon's 20, 25, 30 touches, depending on what week it is. Also, Mixon was not as heavily involved last week. They were throwing it a bit more. So Cam Akers should be added. He'll probably end up, I would say, around the 5 to 6% of fab bid range in my waiver article. So check that. We'll see what he ends up at exactly, but he should be picked up, just not number 1. Alex asks, would you use the number 1 priority claim on Steele? I guess you weren't here for the start of the show, Alex. Yes, I would. He is the number 1 claim in my article and in this show until further notice. Senor Rojo asks, I lost Cup. Thoughts on Whittington? No, senor. Unfortunately, thoughts on Whittington are no. I understand that he got a couple targets in week 2. I understand that he is another piece of that Rams offense that should step up to some degree with Kupp and Nacua out. But I'm not even sold on Demarcus Robinson and Tyler Johnson being super, super valuable. Tyler Johnson, to me, is the clear 2. Colby Parkinson is probably the 3 over Whittington, and Kyron Williams might be the 4. So I am not interested in the 5 in an offense that is devoid of offensive line strength and is not looking productive through 2 weeks. I'm not, unless you're in a 14-team super deep league, I'm not adding Whittington. Pro Bet Minds asks thoughts on Quentin Johnston. Oh boy, Pro Bet, do I have thoughts? He is in the waiver wire article. Was coming into the season one of the top detractors for Quentin Johnston that you could find. I believed he was a bust. I believe he didn't know how to catch a football. Somehow he had forgotten that between college and the pros, and he was a disaster. After week 2, against all my instincts, morals, and better judgment, I included Quentin Johnston in the waiver wire watch. He scored twice, 2 touchdowns in week 2. He leads the team in every receiving stat that matters. What is worth noting is that this team, Los Angeles Chargers, are not throwing the football. They are going full Harbaugh. It is worse than we could have imagined when we talked about it in the offseason, unless you are J.K. Dobbins' manager, in which case it is great. So Johnson being the wide receiver 1 on this team doesn't make him all that valuable for fantasy, especially since he's not a clear wide receiver 1. He's probably the 1A to Ladd McConkey's 1B. But I do think he could be a low-end wide receiver 3, slot into your flex now and then. I have him as a 3 to 4% fab bid in the article. Should be picked up. Good question, ProBet. Demetrios gave me a 10 for the pronunciation on his name. I am balling. Thank you very much. Brad McCoy says, I'm wanting to get rid of Waddle. Who should I be targeting? Felt like a lot of the buy lows went crazy this week. Ooh, that is a tough question just off the cuff, Brad. Let me see if I can find you a name. I will be very honest with you. It is hard to think up trade target names off the fly. Looking around, who would I target with Jalen Waddle? It's got to be someone decent. You could try to get Kenneth Walker, who is injured. I don't think you can probably pull that off, but it's worth a try. You could also try to get James Conner. That's also probably not going to be doable, but it's also worth a try because Jalen Waddle holds a decent amount of name value and James Conner theoretically doesn't, but he's been great for the Cardinals through 2 weeks. At the wide receiver position, if you can go get Rashee Rice, holy mackerel, do it. I would throw some extra in with Jalen Waddle to do that. Go get Rashee Rice. He looks incredible for Kansas City. And as I've mentioned with the way that the offense could go, if they lean away from the run because of Pacheco's injury and towards the pass, Rashee Rice could be not only a wide receiver 1 rest of season, but like a top 5 wide receiver rest of season. So see if you can go turn Waddle and something into Rashee Rice. I would love to do that. Chris Godwin is another great name. I would honestly send Waddle for Chris Godwin straight up. Chris Godwin has looked great through 2 weeks. Baker Mayfield loves him. He is the PPR stud there. He has scored a touchdown in 2 weeks straight. Yep. And 117 yards in week 1. And I believe it was 83 in 117 in week 2, 83 in week 1. He is looking great. I would love to pick him up. I would trade Waddle for him given the quarterback situation in Miami. F. Hearn says, if Mixon misses time, Dameon Pierce or Akers? It would be Akers. I really don't believe in Dameon Pierce. He's a return guy for them at this point. He might get some added work, but it would be Akers. I explained how I feel about Akers specifically a couple questions up. Raman Singh asks, trade Tony Pollard for BTJ, Brian Thomas Jr., and Chase Brown. Now that Spears is banged up, all touches going to Pollard, parentheses, they already pretty much were. Yeah, if you're saying trade away Tony Pollard for this duo, Raman, I would not do that. I really like Brian Thomas Jr. I think he will be a stud for this team, possibly as early as, the end of this month, and for fantasy as well, very quickly. But Tony Pollard could be an RB1 for as long as Tyjae Spears is out, and an RB2 for the rest of season regardless. I'm not yet willing to trade him away for a rookie receiver who's getting like 3 targets a game and a backup running back who's not shown much value. So I would not make this trade. No Name says, this is a big one. Half PPR, give Zay Flowers and Zach Charbonnet and Trey McBride receive Jalen Waddle, Ramondre Stevenson, Sam Laporta, and Dallas Goedert. In need of RB2. Wow, that is tough. I think I would do it because Zach Charbonnet, if you can turn him into Ramondre Stevenson right now before Kenneth Walker comes back and Charbonnet has no value, that's pretty worth doing. I honestly, at this point, I like Zay Flowers more than Jalen Waddle. So note that. But yes, worth doing. Craig List user 12 came in with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Craig. Says, got Mason, Garendo, Hertz, Lamb, London Hall, Connor Benson, Etienne McConkey, J-Mo Ferguson, Parkinson. Who to offer for McCaffrey? Other moves. Wow, that's interesting. So you have both McCaffrey's backups. Ooh, goodness gracious. I don't know if you can offer anyone from Christian McCaffrey. And I think that the person who rosters Christian McCaffrey is going to be very intent on holding on to him unless he or she is desperate. Honestly, what I would say is go look at the roster that has Christian McCaffrey and look where they're weak. Look where they may be desperate. Obviously, if they have Christian McCaffrey, they may be hurting at running back. If that's the case and you want to send James Conner, I guess you could do it. That hurts me though, because I really like James Conner and he's healthy right now and Christian McCaffrey's not and might not be for a month or month and a half, 2 months. But go look what the roster that has Christian McCaffrey is hurting at and try to figure out how to fill that hole for him with giving up the least on your team. For just so I'm clear, I really like Breece Hall. I really like James Conner. I like Travis Etienne. Good gracious, I'm blanking on the second guy. Tank Bigsby, who was great in week 1 and I had as a high priority ad, got banged up in week 2, so he missed a lot of time in this game. I'm not sure what the status on him is yet. I don't think it's super long term, but that's something to keep in mind with ETN. And I really like Jameson Williams. So it's hard to trade away many of these guys. But obviously, if you can pick up Christian McCaffrey on the cheap, it's worth doing. F. Hearn says, drop AD Mitchell for Josh Downs. Someone dropped Downs in my league. Sure, F. Hearn, but as I mentioned above with the Alec Pierce question, I do not feel good about pass catchers in Indianapolis, really outside of Michael Pittman Jr., and I don't feel great about him either. I just think Anthony Richardson is so hard to trust as a passer. Jesse Lopez says, well, Jesse Lopez asks for thoughts on a full roster. Jesse, unfortunately, I don't have the time to go through an entire roster and give my thoughts. If you want to hit me up in my Twitter DMs, though, I will do it there. Craig List User 12 says, I'm a Breece Hall owner. Should I use my waiver priority number 2 to handcuff Braylon Allen? Had 2 touchdowns / 20 fantasy points this week. Depending on what else is available, Craig's List user. I guess you might not be named Craig. You might just be a Craigslist user. Depending on what else is available, yes, that is a worthy move. Braylon Allen in my overall waiver priority is not in the top 10, but he's close to it. And if you have Breece Hall, obviously it would be nice to handcuff him. But there are a number of other guys that in a vacuum I would like adding over Braylon Allen. And I'm also a fan of handcuffing other people's running backs just as much as my own. Because if the guy ahead of that handcuff goes down, now you have 2 good running backs rather than just having one in the case of, Breece Hall going down. It's a little bit of a strategic thing that I lean towards. But I don't hate using the number 2 priority on Braylon Allen if you don't need any of the other guys that are higher in my priority list. BW says, thoughts on Deontay Foreman. Hate, double hate, loathe entirely. He had 14 carries for 42 yards in the Browns-Jaguars game. I'm not sure what happened here. If Jerome Ford got banged up or something, I feel like that has to be the case. I may need to look into this and get back to you, BW, because I don't understand why Foreman would get this much work, especially with Jerome Ford being the more effective runner. Ford had 7 carries for 64 yards, including a 36-yarder, and Foreman had 14 for 42. So Jerome Ford averaged 3 times as many yards per carry. I don't like Foreman. I'm not intent on adding him here. I think it goes back to being the Jerome Ford show, unless he suffered an injury that will linger. So if that is the case, then I go find that out. My apologies to you, BW. Do some quick research and see if that's true. I don't think it is, but if it is, there you go. DCat asks, WTF do I do with Kelsey? Great question, DCat. If you can pick up another tight end that seems valuable, read my waiver wire article and see who's on the list. I would do it and have them in the wings, but I'm not yet ready to bench Travis Kelce, especially if the Chiefs, as I've said many times on this show already, have to swing away from the Pacheco run first concept and back to the old Mahomes sling it thing. Because if they're back in the old Mahomes sling it thing, then we know who the first guy he looks to is, or the guy he looks to after scrambling around for 15 seconds, as only Mahomes can, and Kyler Murray. And that would be Travis Kelce. So you're holding on to Travis Kelce, and you're starting Travis Kelce for now. If this goes on for another 1 or 2 weeks, then we start to get into a real conundrum. I would like to have a backup in the wings that is worth considering or starting in that case, DCAT. So check out the article. Right after that, Tony Kamaj asks, WTF do I do with Laporta? Love these back-to-back questions. I'm not much less concerned. I'm a little less concerned on Sam Laporta just because Travis Kelce is so old that it kind of makes sense that maybe he's finally sunsetting into decoy and Taylor Swift, his decoy and Taylor Swift era. I don't think that's impossible. With Sam Laporta, I feel like that's less likely to be the case. In the game against the Bucks, Amon-Ra St. Brown had 19 targets and Jameson Williams had 11. That shouldn't be the case every week. Sam Laporta should start getting targets. I don't feel great, obviously, about what's happened through 2 weeks. And once again, as with the Kelce answer, it wouldn't hurt to go add somebody. But I think Sam Laporta should bounce back. I said last week after Mark Andrews' horrible start that I believe Mark Andrews would bounce back. He had 4 catches for 51 yards on 5 targets, which still isn't superb, but it's more what we expect from Mark Andrews. I think we will see that from Sam Laporta somewhat soon. Brad Northcutt says, drop Justin Fields for Derek Carr, currently streaming Mayfield Fields, while Love is out. Absolutely, I would do that, Brad. I like Justin Fields. He is in the waiver wire column, and I think he might keep the job from Russell Wilson based off how things are going in Pittsburgh so far. But I like Derek Carr much better. I think he is a more reliable QB1. And having Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr to stream between, you don't even need Jordan Love. Mayfield and Derek Carr are the top 2 quarterbacks in fantasy right now. If you can pull that off, yes, I would do it. And legitimately, if you don't have an IR spot for Jordan Love and you have Baker and Derek Carr and the news on Jordan Love doesn't improve, I wouldn't be that opposed to dropping Jordan Love. That may be a crazy hot take. Sue me. Jesse Lopez asks, should I trade Kamara for Barkley? Lol. Good question, Jesse. We have not seen Saquon Barkley play in week 2 because he plays on Monday Night Football, and we're recording this on Monday morning. He had a week 1 that rivaled Alvin Kamara's week 2, so both of them have had a huge game. Kamara's first game was very good, so Saquon Barkley would have to have a very good game to keep up with Alvin Kamara. Man, this is tough. You might be looking at 2 top 5 running backs here. And it's like, should I trade the number 3 running back for the number 4 running back? Hard to say. If you're trying to pull this trade off before the Monday Night Football game, which seems very unlikely because the person who has Saquon Barkley is going to want Saquon Barkley to play in this game. In fact, there's no way you're pulling this trade off before Monday Night Football. So basically, you're watching Monday Night Football and making the answer to this question based off the result. If Saquon Barkley, you know what? This is what I'm going to say, Jesse. First of all, hit me up on Twitter after the game and get my thoughts. But if you just want my answer heading into this game, it is so close right now between Kamara and Barkley that I will say this. If Saquon Barkley scores less than 20 fantasy points, it's Alvin Kamara. If he scores more than 20 fantasy points, it's Saquon Barkley. That's what I'm going with for now. Jesse Driscoll says, last bench spot, Allen or Wright? I hold Achane and Hall. If I traded Achane, what's his worth? This must be Braylon Allen or Jalen Wright, though I believe Braylon Allen is not spelled correctly. So you threw me off there for a second, Jesse, but I won't hold it against you. Braylon Allen or Jalen Wright, you hold Achane and Hall. Yeah, okay, so that makes sense. You want to know which handcuff to hold with Achane and Breece Hall. I would say Braylon Allen because Jalen Wright has more guys to get through to have value. Although Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert are already banged up, and Achane is very commonly banged up. So it's pretty close, but I'll take Braylon Allen there. If you traded Achane, what's his worth? Unbelievably high, like a top 3 running back right now. So I wouldn't do it unless you get a huge return. KJ Frederick says, down 33 points. Have Hurts going tonight. Do you think Hurts can give me 34 points tonight, full PPR? No, I don't, Frederick. I mean, I think he can, but I don't think he will. The Smitty asks, drop Chase Brown or Zamir White or both, lol. I'm dropping Chase Brown for a number of the guys listed in the waiver wire column, including Carson Steele. I'm not dropping Zamir White yet if I can help it. I know it's been ugly through 2 weeks, but the team showed and expressed a lot of commitment to Zamir White heading into the season. I hope that something still materializes there, so I'm not willing to drop him yet. I admit it is a distant hope right now, but I'm not dropping him. Rob says, I have Jalen Hurts, but worried about losing push TDs to Barkley. You will. Hurts without rushing TDs seems middle of the pack. Somewhat true. Would you roster Mayfield or Carr? I own Godwin and Kamara. Yes, I absolutely would roster both Mayfield and Carr. Not over Hurts just yet, but it's wild to think that we might be headed that direction. But for now, no. Jalen Hurts is still much more valuable than Baker or Carr. But I would love to have either Baker or Carr as a backup. If you ask me which between the two, honestly, a very tough question. As I mentioned earlier, they're the QB1 and QB2 right now. And they've been very, very close in production. And the only reason Baker Mayfield isn't the highest added QB in my column is because Baker Mayfield is already more than 60% rostered, whereas Derek Carr is not. They're pretty close to even. I think I'll lean Baker by a hair, but literally a tiny, tiny hair. Derek Carr is right behind him. I'd love having both of those guys as my backup QB. Senor Rojo, in response, I believe, to my answer, says, I also believe in taking other cuffs. Good job. Braylon Benson, Corum Garendo, Ford, Chase Brown. Who to drop so I can pick up a wide receiver? Wow. Okay, if you have all those guys, holy mackerel, you certainly do believe in rostering handcuffs. Who am I dropping of that group? I am dropping Corum. Yes, I know he finally got some carries in week 2, but it was after the game was so blown out of hand that Kyren Williams was taken out of the game. Kyler Murray wasn't playing. Marvin Harrison wasn't playing. For some inexplicable reason, Matthew Stafford was still taking the handoffs. Don't know why they were doing that, especially without offensive line. but mainly it was because they were just handing it off to Blake Corum for 2 yards. I still don't believe Blake Corum is going to do all that much for the Rams in the near term. So he'd be droppable. Garendo, I have as an ad in the waiver wire column, but he's a low priority ad. He is droppable if you need to pick up a wide receiver, especially with the depth you have at running back. And I just said that I think Chase Brown is somewhat droppable, though honestly probably less droppable than Trey Benson. All these guys, if you're going for a starting wide receiver or a flex wide receiver, are considerable for dropping because they're all handcuffs, except for Jerome Ford. That would be my order, though, on who to drop. BW says, Foreman used to save me in old fantasy leagues. True, he does find a way to crop up and get carries at some point in almost every season, it seems like. But thoughts on Antonio Gibson, how much percent to use of Fab? Thank you. Well, BW, I would point you to the waiver wire article. If you're not subscribed to 4for4, you should do so that you can see exactly how much I would suggest bidding on Antonio Gibson. It is not a high amount, I will tell you that. But I do like adding him. He's my number 5 running back ad in the column. If you want to know the exact number, subscribe, 4for4.com/plans. Use promo code YouTube to get 25% off. The Smitty asks, what's Ramondre and Mason's value? Ramondre Stevenson's value is a little bit higher than Jordan Mason's still because Jordan Mason, at some point, I believe, still will lose his job to Christian McCaffrey. That may not be for a month and a half, which means for a month and a half, Jordan Mason's value is very valuable. But put it this way, if both guys hit waiver wires, I would spend like 30% of my budget, maybe 40% on Jordan Mason. I would probably spend nearly 100% of my budget on Ramondre Stevenson. He was unbelievable in week 1. I think he had 25 carries, if I'm not mistaken. And in week 2, he had 21 carries for 81 yards and a touchdown, also had 5 targets. Ramondre Stevenson might be an RB1 rest of season, especially with the Patriots apparently being much better than we expected them to be. So he's the more valuable running back to me. Jesse Driscoll says, I hold Anthony Richardson or Jaden Daniels. Would you sell off and grab Baker and Carr from waivers? Wow, tough one. Both of those guys obviously have huge rushing upside. But through 2 weeks, that rushing upside has not been enough to outscore Baker Mayfield and or Derek Carr. And both of them are, I think, much higher injury risks. So there's that. I think I would probably do it, yes. I'm going to pull up for you really quick the fantasy points scored by these 4 quarterbacks so far, just so that I can give a contextual idea. So, through 2 weeks, Baker Mayfield, 48 fantasy points. Derek Carr, 43 fantasy points. They are 1 and 2. Jaden Daniels, 41 fantasy points, number 4. And Anthony Richardson, 36 fantasy points, number 7. So, all these guys are QB1s. What I honestly might do is drop one of the 2 rushers. I'd probably lean Anthony Richardson because I think his passing is worse. And pick up one of the passers. And as I said before, I'd lean Baker Mayfield by a hair. So that you have both options essentially and can kind of stream as you see fit. Senor Rojo with a super chat. Thank you, Senor Rojo, says, thanks, I'm definitely champ and no one is trading with me, lol. Fair enough. Not a question, but very valid point. Well done to you. And BW, this will be the last question unless somebody gets in an answer before I finish answering, or gets in a question before I finish answering BW. Although also we're at 54 minutes, so it's about time to wrap this up. BW with another question says, I have Terry McLaurin and Christian Kirk. What are your thoughts? Picked up Brandon Cooks, McConkey, and Jahan Dotson. Who to start next week? I'm going to keep starting Terry McLaurin for another week or 2 and hope that the connection with Jaden Daniels materializes. Christian Kirk, I do not feel good about. Trevor Lawrence is playing badly, and I believe Kirk is the, at best, wide receiver 2 to Brian Thomas in terms of value. Theoretically, he should be getting more targets. Gabe Davis also got a lot of annoying work in week 2. The actual play out there was 7 targets for Gabe Davis, 3 catches for 43 yards. 4 targets for Brian Thomas, 2 catches for 94 yards, and 3 targets for Christian Kirk, 1 catch for -1 yards. It's a mess. So I feel really bad about Christian Kirk. I'd be happy to drop him. I like having Cooks and McConkey. I don't like having Jahan Dotson. I think you can drop him. And as far as who you start next week from that group, again, it would be McLaurin if it's one of them. But check out the receivers in my waiver wire list as well, because you may want to look into adding one of them. There was a couple more questions thrown in while I was answering that. Let's squeeze them in before we hit an hour. Why not? The Smitty says, thoughts on the Rams wide receivers who will get the targets if Kupp is out? I go over this a bit in the column, Smitty. I believe Demarcus Robinson will be the top target. I believe Tyler Johnson will be the number 2 target. I think Colby Parkinson and Kyron Williams will be there for number 3. And then Jordan Whittington will be a distant, unusable number 5. But it's Demarcus Robinson and Tyler Johnson for me as far as addable and startable, certainly in the case of Demarcus Robinson. He should be started in most leagues. Craigslist user 12 says, traded Stevenson for ETN after week 1. Would you have done that trade? After week 1, Craigslist user, I probably would have. Would I still feel great about it? Maybe not. I think they're pretty close. Ramondre has been better through 2 weeks, although ETN has still been good and has scored a touchdown both weeks. They're pretty close. I don't think you should feel bad about it. And Big Bigsby is banged up now, so that could help ETN as well. Jonah K says Garrett Wilson, Derrick Henry, and Sutton for JT, Jonathan Taylor, and AJ Brown. This is a trade question. Garrett Wilson, Derrick Henry, and Cortland Sutton for Jonathan Taylor and AJ Brown. Yes, I will do it. Cortland Sutton is beyond worthless. He's not even a throw-in here. He would be a droppable for me. So it's basically Garrett Wilson and Derrick Henry for AJ Brown and Jonathan Taylor. And I like the pieces on the JT AJB side, both more than the pieces on the Garrett Wilson Derrick Henry side. Master Trader says, do you think Hunter Henry should be considered for waiver wires based on his week 2 performance? Yes, I do, Master Trader. He is not only in the waiver wire column, he is the number 1 tight end in my waiver wire column. Go check it out. 4for4.com/plans if you're not subscribed to get the fab bid I would throw in on him if you're in a fab league. But he is my number 1 tight end ad. And in fact, he is my number 8 overall ad. He was higher than that before the Carson Steele, Samaje Perine situation. And if you're in need of tight end, he could be the number 1 ad. I wouldn't hate it. Let me be very clear. Hunter Henry could disappear next week. I just want that to be out there. But what we've seen, particularly in week 2 when he had a career high in receiving yards, yes, he should be added. Steve says, is AD Mitchell droppable? Yes, I believe he is. Certainly for a number of guys in the column this week. Jason Young with a long question that says, who is a must pickup? 12-man PPR. Then he lists the whole roster. Check out the article, Jason Young. Or check out what is on the screen right now. The top 5 ads. Those guys are close to being must pickups. Although, just by the quick scan of your team, unless you're not including your bench, almost none of these guys are droppable. Maybe Austin Eckler is droppable for a couple of these guys. But go check out the article. The Smitty asked, should I add Steele or Perine? It is Steele, Smitty. And Jesse Driscoll asks, would you trade Breece Hall to the McCaffrey owner if I have a good dead zone RBs and Achane? I'd grab Braylon Allen from waivers for insurance. No, I would not do that, Jesse. Breece Hall is close to as valuable as Christian McCaffrey, but is not currently set to miss 6 weeks. So I'm just going to hold on to Breece Hall there. And Combat Cash Club says, is Dalton Schultz droppable? Probably, depending on what tight ends are available or if you have another tight end that's starting for you. Okay, Ooh, sorry, Mike. I banged the table. Should never do that. That is 59 minutes. That is 1 hour on the dot. We went 1 hour. Wowie, what a show. Thank you for all the questions. If you didn't get an answer or if you have another question, hit me up on Twitter. I am always willing to answer DMs. Go check out the article once again, 444.com/plans, promo code YouTube to save, to subscribe to 444 if you don't already have a subscription so you can read that article. It is 4,500 words long this week, guys. There is a ton of goodness in there. Wooey! Okay. Good luck in week 3. Good luck on waiver wires. I will see you on the Friday show with John Paulson. Adios.